Good morning. As the new people come in, we'll just wait for a few more minutes, a couple more minutes. We're right on 11 now, but we've got quite a few people still to come, so we'll just give them another minute or so.
Can't hear anything. I can't hear anything. Julie?
I can't hear. So we're putting people on mute this morning until we have time for questions, just so it's not quite so distracting for the presenters, and then we'll unmute, or people will be able to unmute themselves for questions. Let's give it another minute or so. We have people coming through quite quickly now. It's lovely to see we have attendees this morning from right across the country. A good gathering from Victoria in particular, as well as Queensland. It sounded a little bit like I was echoing. Okay, look, we might start with the formalities. I want to make sure that our presenters have plenty of time, that we have time for questions. So I'd just like to introduce myself first. I'm Leanne Wood. I manage the Research Evaluation and Advocacy Unit at Anglicare, Southern Queensland. And yeah, welcome very much to you all. So pleased that you could join us this morning. Before I do anything else, I would like to acknowledge all First Peoples of the land in which we live, walk and work on. We honour them and their ancestors for their survival, continued traditions and spiritual connections to and caring of country, land, sky, sea and water. We pay respect to their elders, past and present, and will continue to support their right to self-determination. We're committed to reconciliation and respectfully recognise that sovereignty has never been ceded. So just a couple of housekeeping issues first, where we have muted all of our participants, so please use the chat if you'd like to for questions during the presentations, and then we'll have a few minutes for questions at the end of each of the presentations, and you'll be able to unmute yourself for those. Please be aware that the webinar is being recorded. So I'd just like to, as I said, introduce ourselves. I'm Leanne Wood. Carmela Lagasca is online as well. Carmela is our Senior Advisor, Research and Evaluation, our Evaluation Lead. And the third member of the Research Evaluation Advocacy team is Sarah Maris, who's our Strategic Advocacy Lead and has joined us quite recently in that role. So this is our second research forum in 2024. It's a series facilitated by the team. And the aim of the forums is to showcase the findings of our ASQ research partners, as well as Anglicare's own research projects and the expertise of our staff across a whole range of topics. We usually hold the webinars 2 or 3 times a year, on a range of topics and projects as well. And today we're highlighting some new approaches and strategies in caring for people with dementia. So 2 projects in particular that we're focusing on. The first project is the 3 Ps to getting home safely with dementia. And it's a project that addresses the increased risk of becoming lost that faces people who live with dementia. And it's been developing some strategies that aim to ensure that people with dementia who go missing are found alive and safe. Our second presentation provides an overview of Anglicare's first Specialist Dementia Care Program unit, and which provides a really high level of tailored care for people living with dementia who are exhibiting some challenging behaviours and can't be cared for effectively in mainstream aged care services. So I'm going to introduce our speakers. First of all, Associate Professor Margaret McAndrew is a registered nurse with nearly 30 years clinical and academic experience. Margaret's PhD focused on dementia-related wandering in residential aged care, so she has an enormous amount of experience and knowledge in this space. And she's researched extensively on ways to improve the safety and autonomy of people with dementia who wander through better assessment and non-pharmacological interventions. So I'd like to introduce Margaret.
Thank you very much, Leanne, and thank you for having me here today and for the interest in this project and for partnering on this project as well. I will share my screen with you and hopefully my slides as well. You see my slides? Yes, great. All right, so this project has been funded by Dementia Australia Research Foundation, and I'm a lecturer at QUT, or Queensland University of Technology, coming to you from the lands of the Turrbal and Yagara people up here in Brisbane. Dementia Training Australia will also be supporting part of this project as well. So it is the 3 Ps to getting people with dementia home safely, and those 3 Ps are prepare, prevent, and prompt response. And why can't I move now? There we go. Hopefully by the end of this presentation, you'll have a good understanding of what dementia-related wandering is and why people with dementia are at greater risk of getting lost. I'll go over the origins of the 3 Ps to getting home safely with dementia, and then share the results of the co-design phase that we've just completed, which Anglicare was a partner in that, and what we'll do next with that information. So, dementia-related wandering, it's actually one of the more misunderstood behaviours of dementia, but it's also one of the more common behaviours of dementia-related behaviours. It's estimated to affect over 50% of people living in residential aged care, and it has a very clear definition based on its observable characteristics. So it's a syndrome of dementia-related locomotion, having frequent, repetitive, temporally disordered and spatially disorientated nature that is manifested in lapping, random or pacing patterns, some of which are associated with eloping attempts or getting lost unless accompanied. So in terms of who wanders, we see it more in the younger population of people living with dementia and more men than women. It is more prevalent in the more severe stage of dementia, but it can be apparent from the very early stages, and certainly getting lost can be one of the first signs that someone has a problem, which then triggers people to go and get some investigations done to see why this is occurring. People who wander will have greater sleep disturbances. They usually have more, if you look at their pre-morbid lifestyle, they were more active and had extroverted personalities. And more people with Alzheimer's disease will wander compared to the other types of dementia. And people who wander are more likely to receive antipsychotic medications. So there's some of the characteristics of the people who wander generally. So I'm going to talk generally about wandering, and then we'll move on to getting lost. And I'm not moving. Why? There we go. So one of the things that is often said to me is, why do you study this? It's just walking. Why do we need to be bothered to worry about this. And if you compare walking with wandering behaviour, you'll see that it is very different. Yes, they both involve walking, but for wandering, we also include people who self-propel in wheelchairs, and also any sort of walking aid is included there. A person who wanders will walk much further and for longer than someone their own age and ability, and they rarely take rests while they're wandering. They have a distinct pattern, which rarely involves direct, meaning they'll go to a point and then potentially come back, and that would be the end of their walk. The patterns are pacing, lapping and random, which I'm sure if you know a person who wanders, you'd be very aware of those patterns. A person who wanders will travel much further than someone who's just walking, and it's as though they don't have the switch to turn that off. And they have altered capacity to wayfind, and that's to do with the area of the brain that's damaged, and that's why we see it far more in people with Alzheimer's disease, because that the area of the brain that's needed to navigate is your hippocampus, and that gets attacked by Alzheimer's disease. Wandering will interrupt sleep, but the thing that really sets wandering, differentiates wandering from walking, is that it can result in life-threatening outcomes. And that's why I study this and why I'm looking to try and improve the assessment of wandering generally, but also those risk factors that could result in that person experiencing harm. If we look at all those characteristics of wandering that from that definition that I showed you previously, so if each of those characteristics have specific risk associated with them, and those risks get more intense depending on the type of walking that they're doing, but also the amount that the person of walking that the person does. So it can, a person who's walking a lot is going to become more fatigued, is going to experience pain, and weight loss is a very real thing for this population. If a person is pacing or lapping or has random pattern of walking, they're unlikely to reach their desired destination. Previously, it was thought that wandering had no purpose, but if you sit and watch a person who wanders, when they stand up and start walking, they've definitely got a purpose, but that purpose is often lost, which can result in frustration, anxiety, but things like incontinence can also be an associated risk here for people who wander. Temporal aspects, this means that they walk day and night, and for those who walk at night, sleep deprivation is a big problem, and this can impact their social networks, increases their risk of leaving a safe environment, and increases their risk of falls. We then move into spatial disorientation, so these are people with wayfinding problems, and this is where getting lost really becomes an issue, but it isn't necessarily as catastrophic as going missing and having to have police search for them. It could be that they can't locate the bathroom because that ability to recognise their surroundings and then get themselves from point A to point B successfully is impaired. But the spatial disorientation is a life-threatening outcome of wandering. The last characteristic here is boundary transgression, which wasn't in the original definition because it wasn't classified at that stage. That's that behaviour where people go in and out of people's rooms, and probably has the most life-threatening adverse outcomes that we see, and that starts with resident-to-resident violence. But if that door that they transgress is the exit to a place, then their risk of getting lost is very real as well. So what do we know about people with dementia getting lost? It's a global phenomenon. It affects around 60% of people living with dementia, and 60% will get lost at least once, And many of those people will get lost multiple times if things aren't put in place to increase the support for them. In Brisbane, one land search a week involves a person with dementia, and 1 in 5 missing persons with dementia who go missing will not be found alive. Now, that was back in 2018. We thankfully have seen some improvement, some movement in that, and those numbers are going down a bit, but just one life lost is too many. The greatest predictor of who will get lost is a previous getting lost event, particularly if nothing is put in place to reduce that risk. And from our previous research, it is the 3 Ps that are most likely to prevent a person with dementia getting lost, and then finding them more successfully if they do go missing. So those 3 Ps are prepare, prevent, and then a prompt response. The previous research that we did, we've been working on this for, well, we must be getting on to about 7 years now. It started with trying to identify what the barriers and facilitators were to preventing a person getting lost and then finding them alive. And from that work, we did literature reviews, we did some Delphi processes, and we finished it up with a broad consultation with key stakeholders. And it was lack of awareness that this was a risk for people with dementia. That was the first issue. The fact that there is little assessment of risk done standardly around the country, and that there isn't a standard missing persons procedure for health services. And they make up our 3 Ps. So prepare by raising awareness, prevent by doing early and ongoing risk assessment that then informs risk reduction care planning, and the prompt response is to do with how we react to a person with dementia going missing. In that period, we also developed the Safe Walking Assessment and Planning tool, which is it will identify a person's individual risk profile, which is then we have then linked it to evidence-based strategies to reduce that risk. The work that we've just completed was the co-design phase, whereby we refined that SWAP tool to suit the residential aged care setting and to develop a strategy for implementing that tool into practice. And we also developed a missing persons procedure that would be relevant to the residential aged care setting. Our next phase is to trial the SWAP tool in practice and to launch the missing persons procedure in some aged care facilities and to evaluate how feasible and acceptable it is. I'm going to concentrate on telling you about the results of that co-design phase. So at that co-design phase, we had 2 residential aged care organisations involved, which Anglicare was one of those. We had registered nurses, clinical nurses, lifestyle coordinators, and assistants in nursing come along to those 3 workshops. And at workshop 2, we also invited police, because that was one where we were looking at the missing person procedure. The aims of the 3 workshops, in workshop 1, we aimed to modify that SWAP tool to make sure the strategies were relevant to residential aged care. In workshop 2, we developed the missing persons procedure. And in workshop 3, we consolidated all the feedback to develop an intervention strategy. This is the SWAP tool. It incorporates all of the evidence around what are the characteristics of walking exhibited by a person with dementia that are associated with risk. And it's a simple, do they do it or don't they do it? And if they do it, so if they exhibit that walking habit that is associated with risk, we then have associated evidence-based strategies for you to consider to implement to try and reduce that risk. That list of the list of strategies is very extensive. So we are looking at trying to digitalise that, to refine that process of deciding what strategies you use. Okay, it's moving on its own now. Someone is talking who isn't unmuted. Thank you. This was the missing persons procedure that we then developed with our partners. It's a 6-step flow chart, and the aim is to this would sit in an emergency flip chart, just with all of your other emergency responses. It starts with confirming that the person is actually missing and they're not an appointment or out to lunch or something like that, and then to conduct an initial search. The big thing is alerting police as soon as possible. That is what they want. Even if they arrive and that person is found 5 minutes later, they still want to be informed, because the search that they then commence is specific to a person with dementia, and has been shown to improve the outcomes for that person. Once the police are involved, a more thorough search of the area can be conducted. You then need to be thinking about supporting those who are affected and debriefing as well. So they're the 6 steps that were fleshed out as a result of that workshop too. In terms of how we plan to implement this, these are the ideas that came out of the workshop, and it starts with, in the prepare phase, some education and training for staff, specifically around what wandering is, the risk of getting lost, and the strategies to reduce that risk. And we will be evaluating whether doing that education and training improves knowledge and confidence for staff, but also families will be welcome to do this as well. In the prevent phase, we'll be implementing the SWAP tool and asking our partner organisation to use the SWAP tool with 10 independently mobile people living with dementia to create their risk profile, and then initiate that risk reduction care plan. And we will evaluate the feasibility and acceptability of that, but also look at some resident outcomes that are associated with wandering behaviour, so falls, resident violence, getting lost, and weight loss. And the last piece of this is to then implement the missing persons procedure and add it to the flip chart. That will be accompanied by some short education and some rolling quizzes to evaluate if that has helped you to understand the procedure and if you're remembering that procedure. So that's the end of my presentation. Happy to take your questions. I've got here that you don't need to wait 24 hours to report someone missing to police. We did a survey a couple of years ago of health professionals, and over 50% of health professionals believed you need to wait 24 hours before you can report a person missing. So I always like to finish with dispelling that myth as part of my presentation.
Thank you, Margaret. That was wonderful. Now, people have, we do have a question already in the chat. Carolyn Tracy has asked whether any of the learnings out of the SWAP tool research have been able to inform dementia design briefs for any accommodation work being undertaken for people with dementia.
It's interesting. I've never been consulted around environmental design. There's the train of thought that we should be unlocking residential aged care facilities, and that is certainly a feature of the new design principles. However, where the SWAP tool comes in is identifying those who need to be have safety, security, secure units around them. Previously, it has been quite arbitrary around who needs a secure environment, which perhaps is contributing to the angst around secure environments. But when you're thinking about this is a damaged brain, we're not going to be able to prevent some people from getting lost, and they do require those additional security measures. So I have not contributed at all to the conversation around environments, but I do have quite a bit to say about it in terms of removing all secure environments.
That seems like a big gap, Margaret.
It is.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Are there other questions? We can come back. We can move on to Vicky's presentation, and then, if there's time at the end, then there could well be questions across both of the presentations. So I will introduce Vicky. Vicky is Anglicare's dementia practice lead. Has been working as a gerontology nurse for many years. She's absolutely passionate about dementia care. You've only got to talk to Vicky to know that. And she leads a team of direct care workers in dementia who are committed to providing that kind of quality dementia care, particularly for those who are experiencing moderate to severe dementia. So I'm going to hand over to Vicky, and then hopefully we'll have time for small questions at the end. Welcome, Vicky.
Good morning. Thank you, Leanne. And Margie, that flows so perfectly into what my presentation is about, is dementia design and the importance of creating those great environments. So thank you. You've made my role easier. So I just I'm going to share my presentation now. So one of the main roles that I'm doing at the moment is, there's a slide, stop sharing, let's go. All right. To open that screen, that's okay. So one of the roles that I have with Anglicare is overseeing the project management and also the running of our Specialist Dementia Care Program. So we're very fortunate that we have a very, very successful Specialist Dementia Care unit in Tagum in our north of Brisbane. And it has been hailed as one of the most successful in Australia through Department of Health and Ageing. So we have to look at what makes that successful. What is it about that particular unit that stands out? So I wanted to go through for those that aren't familiar with a Specialist Dementia Care unit, I'll go through a little bit of those. So can everyone see that? Might just increase that. Bear with me. I'll share the whole screen because it's not coming up very well. I want to do it properly. Okay, so where's my screen? So I wanted to get that right for you. Okay, so what's important is that between 2019 and 2022, 62% people transitioned from SDCP to less intensive environments with reduced behaviours of concern or psychological distress. So what that means is, so when the program first came into play in 2019, there was a really good uptake of transitioning people in and out of the SDCU. So as we know that the SDCU bills are related to those residents who what we call Tier 5, Tier 6, very severe behaviours. So they're people, they're residents that don't really cope well in an open area or a mainstream dementia care or even at home in the community. So there's been these residents normally and historically bounce back into the hospitals time and time again. And they end up on high levels of psychotropic medication. And we know that that's not the answer either. So the government have been really, really good in looking at this and saying, what can we do to get these people into homes and become part of communities?
Vicky, I'm so sorry to interrupt your flow. Sorry? Could you pop it back to the previous screen in slideshow format? It was actually easier to read there.
Did it pop out? Did it? Sorry about that, guys.
That's all right.
Naughty, wasn't it? Stop sharing that one. And I'll go back to sharing the presentation. I don't know what happened then. I do apologise. Okay.
That's much better. Thank you.
So what we found is that there was a lot of Deloitte completed a post-implementation review and provided a report on the SDCUs across Australia, and what their outcomes were. And you can access the report anywhere. Just Google it and it'll come up for you. So what it demonstrated is that we had a far reduced use of psychotropic medication, and we still see that now, which is quite phenomenal. We have incredible positive feedback from relatives and families in there. In our particular facility that we have very, very few SIRS reports, which when you put the two together, you think, well, how can you? And it is because of the setup, the staff ratios, the in-reach services that we have with the health services. So we're just in the process of compiling a report around the exact numbers of SIRS and the exact numbers of psychotropics that have reduced in this particular area. So we've got that. We're also seeing some very successful transition into other areas, either into mainstream dementia care or complex care facilities, or even open communities in residential care. And I see them every day at St Martin's, where we've got residents that started their journey in the SDCU and are now free to come and go as they please. You know, and it's just, to me, it's a magnificent outcome that we're actually seeing the importance that people don't need to be locked away to that extent. And if possible, let's get them out. So Anglicare. So St Martin's recognised as an excellent example of successful SDCU with department, and that is really around our recruitment and our staffing, the mix of staff we have in there. And I can assure you, we didn't recruit for skill. We didn't recruit for people's knowledge. What we recruited for were people who had the right fit, people who have the passion, have the desire. You know, because we know it can, and we often see it where staff come on board and, you know, we ask them about how do you feel about working with people with dementia, and you get quite a bit of a blank, nervous look. It starts from the student placement time. You know, I often have that. And Margaret, I can see you smiling about that. I love to spend a lot of time with our students, and you'll hear them say, oh, I'm very nervous, I don't know what to expect. And so starting that conversation, and then without fail, I've seen it over many, many years, that students alone will say, I loved it. I absolutely loved it. I connected with them. I didn't realise how much I would love it. And it's the same with SDCU. It's just another family. And what we do is we talk to staff about, when we interview, we actually get them to share with us that vulnerability, you know, and that's a big thing for us. So we have a lot of non-English speech where when I say that, English is not their first language. And as we know, only 7% of communication is verbal anyway. So to me, having that English language is not the key driver to the success of that relationship. And again, I see it all the time. It's that body language, it's that responsiveness, it's that support and that comfort, and just those connecting with each resident. There is no magic formula, but I think they've got it pretty close. So team member feedback is we've now got staff who passionately want to work in our SDCU. And that is because they've seen that it's quite a unique area. It is good. So again, the DTA, Dementia Training Australia, have now developed a very specific set of training guidelines. And we're now, as we start to open up and do that recruitment for our next 3 SDCUs, we're using that training package because it's absolutely brilliant. The package talks about different tiers of training. So you might have staff who are already really focused and skilled in a certain area of that package. You can then jump to the next side, the next area. So I really like the package. And so we're actually now starting to use that with our next 3 builds. Again, relative feedback is very, very positive. And again, as most of us in the industry know, it's very difficult to transition a resident from a dementia care to a mainstream in the best of times, because it's a very unique environment, and family relatives will say, but that's a family. I'm part of a family in there. SDCU has the exact same challenges. Is once people are settled and become familiar with it and connected, it can be a challenge to actually, you know, work with people to have that, because they love it. The small cottage style living is absolutely key. So the magic number is 9. So you have 8 permanent beds and 1 what we call bounce back bed. So that bed remains empty. And that's for those residents that maybe not coping outside of the SDCU. And so we have that bed there for them so they can transition back in and have a little bit of extra support. We haven't used our bounce back bed in our SDCU. We've nearly used it, but we've been able to provide that great support outside of that. We've had 2 residents and they've settled beautifully. And when I say that, the staff, we're using some of those key strategies that we use in SDCU and bringing that to another area, whether it be a dementia care, complex needs care, and getting the staff to understand the importance of connecting with that person. And I don't think that's, you know, specific to SDCU. It's for everybody, is know my story. Who am I? Connect with me and you'll get all of me. So some of the big things that we've seen, a significant reduction in the use of antipsychotics. Not so much regular, but definitely PRN. Huge reduction. So what I like about this particular model is, and with the SDCU, we have a geriatrician that comes every week. And they work very closely with a GP that we actually bring on board. So we don't actually say anyone can come on board to be part of the SDCU program. So we interview for the GPs, and they work very closely with the team, including working with the geriatrician. Now, what we do find is that titrating of those psychotropic medications are absolutely vital to get the best results. And what we see is this constant shift and reduction over time. And it's just magical. So that's a very successful component of it. Again, we have an increased staff resident ratio. So we have a carer 1 to 4. So that means 1 carer to 4 residents. And we have 2 of them in there, Monday to Sunday, morning and afternoon. We have a full-time registered nurse in there, okay, that oversees it, because you do need that overseeing of that clinical care, the medication management, the documentation, the meeting with the clinical specialist. It's a very, very unique setup, but it works brilliantly. Okay, so we have that. What else have we got there? Higher levels of prescribing, again, we've seen that one, and the clinical team. So again, we've got the same clinical team in there that we've had since 2020, and we're now 24, sorry. I'm wishing it away, aren't I? All right. So one of the things for me, and I always tend to slip this in here very quickly. So we talk about, and I know, you know, Margie, your passions, but for me, language, changing the language whilst we change the landscape. When I hear the words, I don't know, I mean, behaviour is my big one. I don't know what another word is to describe that when it's legislated. But thinking about how we describe a person with dementia in the first instance, the documentation. Do we have to say a memory support unit? I would question and challenge you to explain to me how we support someone's memory in a secure unit. Do we really support their memory, or do we corral them? So, you know, it's all about purpose. So for me, you know, our language that we're now moving towards in our behaviour support plans and restrictive practice, in consultation with Department of Health and Ageing, they said that will be the gold standard moving forward. And I still continue to get resistance about the language that we should be using in our BSPs. And I think, well, I don't want to read them. as a relative and a resident and a loved one, I don't want to read that my resident's violent, that my resident's sexually aggressive, that my loved one is, some terrible things used to describe a person with dementia, and it makes me want to shudder. So I wanted to just quickly challenge people on thinking about when I say the word apple. What colour do you think? Most people will say red, green. I've had pink come up, the old pink lady apple. And I've even had people say to me, the Apple icon logo. So the reason I use that exercise is because our brain thinks in images. So when people say to me, oh, it's just a word, that word has a lot of power behind it. And so I challenge you to think about in your own organisation and in your own lives about the importance of words. So if we think of the word feed and feeding, which are synonymous in aged care, I ask you to consider what industry would we associate the word feed and feeding? And I would suggest it's farming and nursery, childcare. When I say the word compliant or non-compliant, I would ask you what industry do we relate that with? I would say court of law, a prison, and the police. And when I say the word direct and redirect, I would ask you what industry would you relate that to? I would say traffic controller and a lollipop man. And so then I would ask you, in what context do they have anything to do with people living in aged care? I have to say none whatsoever. If I'm at a cafe, if someone came up to me and said, can I assist you to cut up your feed? Two things would come to mind. They've either worked in aged care before, or what in the world are you thinking? So connect it with your own life. Connect it with your everyday. And for me, that's why I'm so passionate about the language. If we're going to change the landscape, let's change the language with it. Okay, so I always try to look at everything from a positive strength-based when we're doing that, including in the SDCU. So information using life preferences, I don't think we use the richness of our lifestyle teams to actually cross-pollinate these very vital care plans. So I tend to do that. It's a moving document. For me, where we see a life preferences or a lifestyle care plan done up within the first 7 days of admission, I feel horrified because it stays like that. It's a bit like if you think about the dietary profile, if you come into aged care and you say you like wheat bix and marmalade, guess what you're getting for 5 years? Wheat bix and marmalade. So that's one of the things that we do. So environmental restrictive practice to reflect transition from not only SDCU but mainstream MSUs, if you'll notice I've said in there, which is, again, memory support unit, which we don't need to be using. So think about how do we have those conversations with families on those restrictive practice when someone comes into dementia care and they're no longer actually suitable for it. They don't require that area. We don't document that well. We don't have those conversations well. We wait till someone's at that stage and we say, oh, we've got to move them. And then we're shocked when a family member says, but I don't want them to. So what I like about the SDCU, if you look at those documents for the admissions and those conversations, they are absolutely vital and then can be woven into our mainstream dementia care. Fantastically worded. So, again, the mind thinks in pictures. What do we do next? All right. I'll give you a couple of examples, and these are real examples. Terrifying. When I see that we've got someone, this is on a behaviour support plan, where I see someone urinating on doors and dining room tables. I don't know how they got up on the table, but I'm sure that's not what the person means. So we look at that and we see what the trigger is, need to empty the bladder. Is that a trigger? That's just a human need. And then I look at the exacerbation is confused. Now, this is a person who has advanced dementia with very severe behaviours. And then what's the intended outcome? To maintain dignity and continence by urinating in the toilet away from community areas. I guarantee that's not his goal. He doesn't give a red razoo about any of that. And then I look at the strategies there, best practice strategies. Staff to direct Michael towards the toilet. And I think it says at about 4:30 in the afternoon. So to me, it looks like Michael only gets to go to the toilet at 4:30 in the afternoon with assistance. Poor Michael. And we wonder why he's urinating on tables and doors, which he's not. So again, it's a real skill to actually write well and to, I guess, to interpret. I tend to interpret the act and everything else along with it to its very basic. And so when I read something, I want to actually read that you know me. So the difference is I've rewritten a BSP for another person who's actually in a SDU. And what we've done, describe the behaviour. What do you see? What am I doing that you can connect with? So the behaviour isn't urinating on such and such. It's how I'm feeling. That's the behaviour. What's the trigger? Is it my depression? Is it the type of dementia I have? Because that has a significant impact on some of the symptoms that we see. And although we know that caring for someone doesn't require the diagnosis, it certainly makes a difference in certain areas. And I truly believe that, and I really struggle to actually remove that. So if you look at this particular lady, so she has a lot of depression that's also compromised. You see, when I say here, the exacerbation, so her exacerbation is her loneliness, missing my sons. She already has long-term depression compromised by severe PTSD. Okay, so what is her outcome? What would she like to do? And this has come from her. I would like to be, I can't even read that, included. And she wants to feel part of something. So she was able to express that to me. She certainly didn't say, I don't want to be depressed. She certainly didn't say, keep me safe. You know, and then when we look at best practice, I challenge you to stop thinking so much in best practice clinical medical terms. Best practice is what's right for me. So what is right for this particular lady is we discovered that she loves the royal family. This woman was a teacher, a music and English teacher. She's got such a rich history. She's quite young. So when she talks about the movie Love Actually, that's a movie I know. I could talk to you all day about that. Okay, so she's quite an intellectual person as well. So there's no use talking down to her and patronising me, because guess what? You're not going to get anything from me. So again, that language, you know, I would be quite proud and quite happy as a relative to receive that. And I've had this particular sons who struggle with mum's diagnosis have said, oh, you get my mum, you get her. She's important. She's somebody important. She's done important things. Okay, so, you know, they are not easy to write, but it gets easier and easier. So again, looking at the goals, what do we do? So we've achieved the core objectives in our SDCU. We provide care for people exhibiting very severe BPSD who are unable to be effectively cared for by mainstream aged care. We focus on the stabilising and reducing the person's symptoms over time. So the aim is 6 to 12 months transition into SDCU and then out. It's not set in stone. So we have those conversations. We also have very, very fantastic relationships with our regional health support. Our geriatricians will contact families and have those conversations. That is just magical. We've got enhanced the existing health and aged care service systems for people with very severe PTSD. We are hoping that we continue to see that shift in having people transition to these areas and then out. So we know that with the dementia care design, that we're seeing a change there as well. We've got a new build coming online mid next year that will absolutely meet all the dementia design principles. So there will be that flow. There will be that openness and no L-shaped design. Certainly no L-shaped design. Although I have had an L-shaped design facility myself, and we still created magic. So it's about what you do with what you've got. And to me, it's about the people within that area, how they support the person with dementia in that way, finding in that engaging in purpose and meaning, creating a home, and really doing that well. So that's my presentation.
Vicky, thank you so much. We've got 10 minutes, so we have got time for some questions for either Vicky and or Margaret. I did notice Trish asked a question earlier on. I think it's probably more related to your presentation, Margaret, but feel free, both of you, to answer. Trish has asked, what can be used at a person's home that's not a use of restricted practices such as locking a door? What do you? You're on mute, Margaret. There you go.
Yeah, unfortunately, the only foolproof method of preventing a person from getting lost is 24/7 supervision, which is not sustainable in any environment. And we did interviews with people living in the community and caring for a person at risk of getting lost. And they reported things like having to lock people in cars so they could go and do their shopping, tie people up just so that they could go to the toilet. So to be able to achieve just those basic human needs, they were having to take very extreme measures. So it's around supporting carers, making sure that they have adequate respite care, and putting things in place so that if a person does go missing, that is recognised early and that the police are notified quickly. Wearing things like a medic alert we no longer have the getting home safely. We used to have, Dementia Australia used to have bangles. They aren't supported in every state now, but medic alert is. And you can register the person's name, and so that there is a return address on the back of the bracelet. You can get GPS tracking, all those sorts of things, but they're only as good as the technology. The person has to be wearing it. So at the end of the day, you have to be prepared that they will go missing. If a person with dementia, if they're able to walk themselves, they are at risk of getting lost, and you need to be prepared for the fact that they will get lost. And that means responding quickly to that. After a quick search, you inform police and you let them know they have dementia.
Thank you, Margaret. Vicky, did you have something you'd like to add to that, or you're okay with that?
Look, I would agree. And it's no different than in residential care. But I have to say, Margie, I love, love, love adding that missing person onto the flip chart. Piece of gold.
Yeah. Well, in those emergency situations, people go blank, and to have that reminder of what you should be doing, and on that flip chart, it recommends that you're informing police within 15 to 20 minutes of recognising a person is missing, which is quick, which reinforces you're doing a quick search. You're quickly phoning families because time is everything in terms of trying to find that person.
Thank you, Victoria. I'm just having a look too. So Tina has mentioned that adding her mum onto her Life 360 has been helpful, as she can locate her when she gets lost. Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of people are using that. So Find My Phone is another method that people are using. They're free and quite simple. Just be wary, though, the person has to have the phone with them, and the phone has to be charged. So it is still limited by the technology itself and ensuring the person has that with them. But it's certainly something you can try, which is great.
Tina's also made an interesting comment here about the physical space, which kind of, I think, is related to your conversation, to your presentation too, Vicky, where she's talking about Hammond Care in Caulfield, which has a dementia-focused design with supermarket and gardening for residents as well. which, you know, we're sort of starting to see that kind of design coming through, aren't we?
Yeah, it's so important that we create that normal life for engagement. So, you know, gone are the days where we can put makes me cringe, a library book decal on the back of a door. Have you ever seen a resident go to get a fake book off a fake bookshelf? It's humiliating and distressing. So, yeah, those environments are really, really important. But, you know, and there's a huge, big discussions at the moment, debates around therapeutic lying. And I would caution people when we're doing decals and things like that, are we looking at supporting someone or deceit? And there's a huge difference. So, you know, I'm all for decals, but make it mean something to the person. I've run a successful project when I was with Anglicare in Dementia Australia, where we actually introduced decals on doors, but they weren't door decals. They were decals that were part of a person's joy in memories. So, in particular, one lady, best place she visited was the Japanese tea garden. So I found decals about the Japanese tea garden, and that's what we had on her door. Because as we know, residents take the door names off, and she knew that was her room. I've been there. I've been there. Do you know where that is? I've been there. This is my room. So that dementia design, but purpose and meaning, making sure that residents have access to cooking, cleaning, washing. You know, I just read something this morning about I'm a passionate, authentic cook of Indian and Malaysian food from scratch. No packets, no jars. If you take that from me, you will see BPSD.
Thank you, Vicky. So we're only 4 minutes out from the end of the session, so we might wind up here. Thank you both so much to both of our speakers for some really thoughtful and and very deeply felt experience that you're sharing there with us. Thank you to all of our participants. It's been great for you to be with us. I'm going to take this opportunity for a very short advertisement that our Research Evaluation and Advocacy Unit has just started a brand new LinkedIn page just a couple of weeks ago. And we will be posting a link to this webinar and many of the other research projects that we're involved in on that page. So we would love it if you would follow us. And we'll also be sending out a link via email with hopefully just 1 or 2 questions that if you've got a moment to give us some feedback, that would be great. We hope to see you at future webinars. Thank you so much again, everybody. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.